Welcome to Abrupt. Climate change is here. Now what? The goal of this channel is to have a conversation about how do you, as an individual, deal with knowing about abrupt climate change. So how do you go on your everyday life knowing that we are in the middle of the sixth mass extinction event, that abrupt, irreversible climate change is happening right now, that we are facing not only our own extinction, but the extinction of just about most of life in this planet, and that all of this is happening within our lifetimes. So when you even just say that out loud, it sounds ridiculous, and it sounds like, you're just being alarmist. How can this actually happen? If things were that bad, the government would have done something about it, or scientists would have figured out a way to avoid disaster, or if this is, I just think that it does sound ridiculous. And we know that civilizations collapse, right? We've seen this in history for various reasons. So I'm pretty sure that nobody in whatever collapsed civilization thinks, oh, I think I'm living in the time of collapse. I think it takes people by surprise, even if you are familiar with the mechanisms that cause collapse. It still comes down to, oh shit, this is really happening. So this is really heavy information that a lot of us who learn about this stuff find that we can't talk to anyone about. And as soon as we try to talk to someone about, they push us away or think that we're crazy. So that's why I think it's important to actually have this conversation. And, that's why I'm doing this channel here, because I'm trying to encourage that conversation, or even people who listen to what I'm saying and they can relate. Or even to just feel that, if they do think that they're crazy, that there's somebody else who's just as crazy as they are. So I want to talk a little bit more about how I found out about this information and kind of like my process. So I first found out about climate change by watching a documentary by Bill Nye the Science Guy. I forgot what it's called, but I can put the information below. And I think it was called Bill's Climate Breakdown or something like that. And it was great because it explained how fossil fuels works. It explained how the atmosphere works. It explained all the whys, like all the what is happening and kind of the why it's happening and the implications of the future. And it freaked me out because I was like, oh shit, we really can destroy the planet and make it unlivable. And I just got really scared by that possibility. But what I think is brilliant about that movie is that he uses the stages of grief to explore, our trajectory. So I think that that's actually a really good idea, because when you find out that civilization is over, this is like the biggest loss, right? You feel like the planet is dying, and you go through the stages of grief, and that you're dying with it, right? So a lot of people say, well, everybody's going to die, or you can die tomorrow and it's no big deal. So, why worry? But this is beyond that. We're talking about the death of everything and everyone we're not talking about you as an individual dying. When we're looking at the worst effects of climate change or catastrophic climate change, we're talking about the death and destruction of just about, every living thing that we can see. And that, to me, that's scary, that's shocking, that's unsettling. So I don't understand when people just dismiss that idea. I don't know, maybe it comes out of fear that they don't want to even hold that thought in their mind that everything around them is going to die. So anyway, yes, I think that we do go through the stages of grief, anger, despair, depression, and eventually acceptance. But so anyway, as I found out about this stuff, in that documentary, they interviewed Guy McPherson, who basically, what he does is that he does presentations all over the country and the world, explaining abrupt climate change and explaining how we're going, like the mechanisms that are making our civilization humans go extinct. And that's really alarming. So when I heard about this guy, I Googled him, right? I go to YouTube, I saw some of his videos. I'm like, this guy's nuts. I mean, this is ridiculous. But, I was like, well, what if he's right? I'm going to, fact check what he's saying. And I did go basically down this rabbit hole, as some other people have described it. And I did some more research. What is climate change? And what does that mean exactly? And it was cool because I got to learn, well, first of all, this was all free for me. I have the internet connection, I had a laptop, so I was kind of teaching myself about climate science, and I didn't study science in school at all, so this is all new to me. But like I mentioned before, like I've listened to lectures by different professors and, stuff like that, so I got to learn a lot of really cool things. But at the same time, I kept thinking, fuck, man, this guy is right, and if this is true, then it changes my whole life completely. And that made me feel really depressed, when I realized, well, we are experiencing the end of the world in my lifetime. So that's scary, number one. And then number two, then I thought about, well, how does that impact me? And I immediately went into math, right? So I'm like, he's saying by the end of the century, okay, how many years is that from now? And okay, if things are going to be bad by the end of by the middle, so that's 2050, so I started thinking about my retirement age, because that's what I was focusing on right now, was building my career, building a retirement account, because, compound interest, and, I really wanted to have a comfortable life, till my retirement. But then I find out this stuff, and I'm like, well, there's not going to be a retirement. Civilization is going to collapse before I even reach the age of 60. So then, to me, it was like, then I'm not going to contribute to an IRA account or to a 401k, because I'm never going to use that money. And the economy is going to collapse. So even if I did set up this money, I mean, it's going to go away, because the economy is going to collapse, just as we are with climate change. So that was a huge shift, right? And just even the way that I think about stuff. And then it did make me reevaluate what my goals were, what my priorities were. I wanted to have a good paying job, a good career, and I wanted to buy a house, and I wanted to have a family. I really wanted to be a parent and to have a family of my own. But as I found out about this collapse that we're experiencing, I was thinking, well, I don't want to buy a house, because I don't want to buy a house. Well, first of all, there's no way in hell that we can afford a house in the Bay Area. But, even if we could magically somehow get the funds to buy a house, it's going to be a bad investment, because we're going to, we live on the coast. We are going to, our property itself is going to experience damage, and we're not going to be able to sell it. Nobody's going to want to buy a flooded house, right? So anyway, but then even going and pushing it further, like, oh shit, I don't want to have a child, because they're going to grow up in this decay. And I'm like, if they even get to grow up. And that to me was just crushing. That idea of saying I'm not going to be a father, and I wanted to be a father my whole life, especially now, right? That was crushing. That really, that in itself sent me into this huge depression stage, where I felt so much loss. Like, it sounds really weird. Like, I was grieving for a child that had not even existed. I mean, it was just like this idea in my mind, but it was such a dream. I mean, and it still hurts to think about that, And so I think that for me, that's how, climate change impacted me right off the bat, of like, well, looking at the timeline, the goals that I had in my life, they're not compatible. They're not going to happen. So that really sucked. And then I became obsessed with like trying to figure out the timeline. And I think that happens to a lot of us that first run into this information, where it's like, oh shit, all right. I can accept that the world's going to end, but when is it going to end? Because I think that, then we think that we should change our priorities. And I think that's one of the good things about learning about this stuff and knowing. I think that even despite all the pain that comes with knowing everything's going to collapse, you still have time, right? I mean, you have time to be present. You have time to do the things you want to do. You have time to spend time with your friends and family. You have time to tell people that you love them, instead of just one day you wake up and, a hurricane is in your area and you live in an area that doesn't have hurricanes and it destroys everything, So, and we are going to get to that point. We're going to get to the point where we just have this unimaginable climate disasters that we're just not going to ever recover from. So travel is going to become impossible. So, so I think that's one of the good things that come out of it. It gives you time to really think about, okay, death and dying, right? You accept it. You're going to die, and everything around you is going to die. And that's crushing, but at the same time, nothing is dead yet, for the most part, right? So I still have time to spend time in nature and enjoy it. I still have time to travel if I can travel. I still have time to visit family and friends in different parts of the country because I have a car and I can go. And it there's going to be a time where travel is going to be impossible. So I think that's one of the good things that comes out of knowing about this collapse. But it does go through a lot of heartache. It goes through a lot of depression, a lot of anger, a lot of dark moments. I mean, a lot of just feeling doom and gloom. But there's also positives. And I think that one of the things that keeps me going is to remember that the world is not ending in my face yet. I see it ending all over. But I'm very fortunate to live in an area where we haven't had a lot of extreme disasters outside my door. But I know it's coming. I know right now, even just we're looking at El Nino, which means more dry conditions for California, and that's not good. So I know the threat is out there. I know it's going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So I try to remember that in those moments that I'm just feel so just depressed about it. But anyway, that's just one example of how I came to know this information and how it impacted me personally. So I don't know if other people talk about that grief of this life that they thought they were going to have. And another thing that really just freaked me out was then imagining my family thinking, how are they going to die? Even saying this thought out loud kind of makes me feel really uncomfortable, and to share that thought in public. But I did feel that way. My family lives in a place that is prone to drought, and I actually just today I heard a news story that the state has formally declared a state of emergency because of the drought. So I'm like, wow, that's gonna suck. How is my mom gonna go? How my nephews and nieces are not gonna grow up? And that really hurts. It really hurts a lot, and it's hard to even talk about. But I have good news about that as you go on along with this process and you learn and you accept the truth and that everything's falling apart, that pain and those thoughts kind of diminish a little bit. Like, I don't really think about that anymore. But initially, it was really crushing and very depressing. But anyway, so this is a lot of personal sharing here about my experience with climate change and how I found out about it. I'm going to put links below of some of the stuff that I was talking about, like that movie. And when I say